We'll get to the Revelation text in just a few minutes. If you go to a bookstore, there's a huge subsection of books, and has been for a generation, of business books. More business books sold than almost any other subcategory. And for the last 20 years, this is the word they've all had in it: entrepreneur. In case you can't read this, let's review some things that come up when we say, are you an entrepreneur? Things like confidence. That's not easy when things are shifting. Passion, congruent, positive. How to stay positive. Up on top, goal, open, authentic. There's a word that wasn't around 20 years ago in business books. Profit, of course, audacious, act. Facilitator. Not just what you are doing, but what you're getting others to do. Starter, resilient, integrity, challenging. Action, honest, responsible, leadership. You'd recognize some of those words. Think, future, purpose, opportunities. There's a great word for today in being spiritual entrepreneurs. Trust, self, priority, perspective. It's a challenging, promising, difficult word. So imagine you're selling a widget. Whatever that widget is. What changes in the business world have you noticed in your career as a widget seller over the last 20, 30 years? Everything. Could we be a little more explicit? Diane, what have you noticed in selling your widgets over the last 30 years? Don't bother printing a newspaper. The way we even read has changed. Advertising.
You have to use the internet.
You have to use the internet even if you're not comfortable doing it. What else?
Got to reply to the yells.
Have to have it now. Oh, Brett, what?
Got to reply to the yells.
Got to the critical reviews online. I went to get my car fixed, and boy, he must have been in a bad mood. But you have to get online and say, so sorry. Would you like a free oil change or something? Wow, good. There's voice of experience.
I have to change my widget because it's no longer relevant.
You have to change your widget entirely because the widget that worked 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago might not even be relevant anymore. Haley? Social media. Everyone's going to be talking about your widget on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Yeah, Nance?
I can't maintain a widget store anymore. I have to market them in a different way.
There's a whole problem. You can't just have a place where the store, people can come and get it from you. Diane?
I have to look about where I'm going to have it built. And maybe close my eyes to a lot of things I don't like.
Oh, that's interesting. In the production of your widget, you might be upset by where and how it's built to get it to market. Maybe extra conscious of that in ways we weren't 5 or 10 years, 20 years ago. Interesting. Jeff?
24/7.
Because I want your widget in the middle of the night, and so, it's not just 8 to 5, Monday through Friday thing. All right? Great answers. Tom?
But you can't find anybody you can call. You don't have people.
Because when you call me to get my widget, it's just an answering machine anyway. Please leave a message and maybe, interesting customer service. Both more expected, less delivered in some ways. More on that in a minute. What these business books talk about, besides being an entrepreneur, is being adaptive, not just good at change. That's old news. You have to be good at change and ready to change more quickly than before. It's really an appalling, scary, wonderful time to be in business for anything. One of the books said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I think about this all the time. How, in a world of such accelerated change and confusion, what do you focus on? Well, after all this said and done, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. What a challenge. So many distractions, so much to forget what you're about. And that's where we are today. The main thing, keeping the main thing the main thing. Following Easter in the lectionary, where they guide us through the Bible, what text to read, Psalm 23 always comes up a week or so later. Because being the sheep of the flock, following our shepherd, our tender shepherd, Psalm 23, the most famous of the Psalms, is the good news for being cared for. I love this psalm. Today's lesson in the psalm is when you're singing your part, if you want to be in harmony, you have to do two things. You have to both listen, in my case, to the guys next to me, and you have to not listen to the guys next to you. This is really tricky. We were just talking about this. Lynn has to sing his part, get some guidance from Don sometimes, but if he listens too much, our parts come together, right? Harmony is, and this psalm setting especially, is about some dissonance. The reason it's beautiful is not just octaves or simple parts, it's complex. You have to know your part as an entrepreneur, and in order to be close to someone, you have to listen to what they're doing, be aware of what they're doing, and stick to your part, or else the whole thing goes down. You should have heard our first few run-throughs this morning, 8 o'clock, 8:15. Takes a while to warm up to be a group. John 10, the text that Jeannie just read, I like a lot because it also is paired with Psalm 23, these 2 or 3 weeks after Easter. Talks about being the good shepherd. And there's a danger of competition. Jesus saying, there's other voices out there, they're going to be tempting, don't follow them. There's other shepherds out there, don't follow them. They're going to sneak in, they're going to steal flock members, they're going to have, you got to be true to this flock. You got to be true to yourself. Listen to my voice. It's a great reminder. My sheep know me, Jesus says, because I call them by name. In sales, there's always this piece of personal relationship. It all comes down to personal relationship. You got to know what your customer wants. You got to be available to them. I lay down my life for my sheep. There's this service, willingness, vulnerability. And then this very surprising verse. Did you catch this? I mean, this is from John's gospel. John is either your most favorite or least favorite gospel. John never falls 2 or 3. You either think this is great, it's got everything to it, or you don't like it because there's exclusion in John and paranoia and anger. Our community from John, at least first century, was persecuted. We'd been kicked out of the synagogues. We resented the heck out of it and we were angry. And so in John alone, do you have some of the anti-Jewish, those bad guys, darn them language. In John alone, you have this perfect exclusive passage, John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one's getting in except by me. That's one of the toughest verses in the whole New Testament. The reason your kids and grandkids aren't in church is significant because of that verse. Their knowledge of pluralism and what they see God doing elsewhere. They can't abide being in a community called Christendom for them, big blanket, that purports to be the only way, the only truth. But then, a few verses earlier, we have this. Do you not know, Jesus says, the shepherd, I have other sheep that I lead that are not of this flock. And I always think, what? Hello, you do? What can that possibly mean? I think we should all know this John 10 verse as well as John 14:6. I think this is the most pluralist of verses in John's gospel. Don't you know that the work I'm doing doesn't just involve you? Now, we Presbyterians at one point, I suppose, would have said, you mean you might be saving Lutherans and Methodists? You know? Now we know what you mean. You might be working out of Protestantism and Catholicism. Now we know this verse means God is doing saving work in Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam. This is the most permissive giving verse saying, don't you know, you don't get to see everything I'm doing. Be happy with your flock. This other business I'm doing isn't your business. But we get to say, wow, God is saving people. God is saving Muslims. How is that happening? Well, it's this verse here. Don't you know there's other flocks I take care of too? Whatever cosmic step you know, how God is evident in other world religions. Here it is. Can we abide that? I want Jesus to just be with our flock. What a growing verse. And then, in addition to this pluralism, of course, this wonderful universalist verse. Because, in the end, he says, there's just one flock, one shepherd. This is extraordinary. In this most paranoid of Gospels is one of the greatest hopes for unity. We'll be here in a few weeks when we go to post-Pentecost to Trinity Sunday, when we talk about our traditions struggling forever with the many and the one. trying to have it both ways. How can we follow Jesus knowing He's our way, and apparently from what He says, He's other people's way as well? All right. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Very good. You're picking up well. Now, at Genesis Church, we have some language for this. It is not enough to say, we're Christians. It's not enough to say we should love each other. That's certainly true. It's not even enough to say love is the main thing. That doesn't guide us enough. We at Genesis have come up with some notions, what makes us a little unique in this flock. Who can tell us about the 5 core values Genesis has said? These are the peculiar pieces inside this sheepfold. We know there's other sheepfolds, but we think our Good Shepherd has led us to this flavor of ministry. Who can tell us about 5? Even if you happen to glance at Diane's great posters in the back on the way in, one at a time. Linda? Bigger pardon? Yes. However we put this, there we go. For lesbians and gays and transgendered, we have said, look, our love is inclusive. We don't get in this book Jesus saying, I love you unless you're this way, unless you're over 6'3", or no, we say, and there are people in our community who have been hurt and excluded by the church. So we've said, in loving, the thing we need to be conspicuous about is this inclusion. We just put a while back, nice rainbow on the sign out there. I like it a lot. What else?
We believe women are fully human.
What? What a radical notion for Christendom. We believe women are fully human. I know feminist can be a hard word, but there it is. We've said enough of the garbage about not ordaining women, not treating them as equals. We get that there's other flocks where they have different rules. Not here. What God's love in Jesus Christ is leading us to is a full inclusion of women at every, not just nursery, childcare, Sundays, at every level. What else? Good? 2 for 2.
God is elsewhere.
Yes, since we're kind of there today, that pluralist word. We have it on our page and online and on our statements. God elsewhere too. That's it. And when you think about it, it's a radical statement. Your kids, by the way, know full well and already affirm these other things. The pluralism they're having a hard time with, they know it, but they've never heard a religion say it. They assume that all religion is saying, I've got the truth, and that means no one else can have it. And they know that's not true, and that's why they're not coming, and it won't be part of Christendom any longer. Because we've failed in this many in one. We've failed, especially here, to give our shepherds truth that, hey, what, there's other flocks? And you're still the shepherd. How's that work? Great discussions there, but that's challenging and a great threat to much of Christendom. There's 3 for 5. Should we call on Diane? It's too easy to call on Diane because she made the posters. I'm going to go back to Joyce. What? Science. Wonderful. We call it science in Scripture. Our way of saying, look, Grandpa John Calvin said there's only one God, one truth. You got nothing to worry about. There's nothing you can discover anyhow, anywhere that needs to scare you. Thank God for scientists who show us what is. Shame on Christians who fearfully cling to what they think they know and exclude others, exclude science, make our world a much more dangerous, deadly place because I think it threatens their faith. The challenge of reading God's Word, coming up to truth, letting God speak through ancient text and modern texts is how we're energized and fed. Good. Un más, por favor.
I think it's stewardship.
It's not stewardship, but anytime an elder says stewardship, I go, yes, we should have 6. It's close, actually. Discipleship is some of the language we use. There's one other word I think is a little better. And the word is activist. Now that's a hard word. I wasn't that old in the 60s, but some of you have a bad sense of activism in the 60s and protest. I want to say yes. It's not just politically. Genesis believes we should be out marching and protesting and talking about how we vote. All that stuff matters. The reason I want to go with not just stewardship and discipleship is we believe even in worship there's an activist quality, that we want more than just sitting in these nice chairs, receiving what Don says, listening. You got to do all those things, and you take part in conversation. We'll be doing this by way of offerings again in a few minutes, when we from one another expect a participation. And yes, you better be involved discipleship-wise and filling out your pledge card and using your gifts, all that stuff. Yes, yes, yes. And even in the way we worship or think of this flock, we come back to activism. Just like that. All right. Good. Well done. Well done. Genesis key things. Last couple weeks, as I preached for the first time ever through Ezra and Nehemiah in my career, we're talking about a rebuilding, remodeling of the temple. Old Testament's concerned with reestablishing security, and so we are paralleling what is Genesis doing? How can we make sure this place and these people can be well cared for years to come? And so there's this temptation, even as a congregation back then, of insulation versus reaching out. And we have this ongoing tension of, is it just about us? Or is there someone else out there we should be a part of as well and give them a say for what we're up to? Now we're ready to finally turn to Revelation. Turn to the end of the story. Revelation 21. I love that easier to work from the back. Revelation 21. I'm going to read verses 1 through 6 that they also have this time of year in the lectionary. It gets us to the very end. Where are we going as individuals, as a people? This is called the new heaven and the new earth. These 6 verses. I'm on page 259 of your Pew Bible if you're following along. Then I saw, and by the way, that then I saw, if you recall what we've been through in Revelation is so many then I saws. Actually, this is the 7th then I saw, which lets us know we've arrived. Fullness of fullness, 7 of sevens. But there's been such horrific, wonderful things in this sci-fi, insane book of Revelation. We're ready for something. Here it is. Then I saw a new heaven and new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. I love that because everything that's been previous to this has just been washed away. Every other most spectacular thing, but now it's new, it's all gone, and now all starting over. And the sea takes us right back to Genesis 1:1. The first thing God has is a voice moving over the waters. We're back where we started, but not really. And I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem. This is what much of the Old Testament is preoccupied with, this Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautiful, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them, they will be His peoples, and God Himself will be with them." That's fascinating. If you think about this, the entire function of the temple up till now has been to keep a holy of holies, to keep up us worshiping here. You put the priest sometimes gets to go get the word, the elements. God is about gathering in this distance, and God will dwell with people. That's outrageous. That's phenomenal. You mean Moses won't turn glowing white anymore? He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. If 21:4 isn't the most beautiful verse in the entire Bible, we'll have to work hard to come up with a better one, right? No more mourning, every tear wiped away. We've arrived. And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." Also he said, "Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true." And he said to me, "It is done, it is accomplished. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life. Beautiful. We've waited for this a long time. You'll know one more thing, by the way, in God's presence with us. We've been fighting so much about the temple and its destruction and its rebuilding and how to get back to the good old days. When will Israel be formed again? New prophet, new Moses, Jesus comes to tell us how to love one another. And now we get, now we're going to get back, new heaven, new earth. The first question we'd ask is, where's the temple? And later in this chapter, of course, it says, and the temple is no more. There's no need for a temple. Wow. God will be with us. We'll have this presence with us. How can we imagine the discipleship of God being with us? Where are we going? Yes, heaven is our concern. Where are we saved to? What do we hope for? Our loved ones who are gone, reunion, our own eternal path. Yes, yes, yes. Where are we going as a congregation? Where do we go collectively? How do we live today as well? In closing, when you're spiritual entrepreneurs, when the widget you've got that people need, you're suddenly going to be selling it around table. They won't be coming to your store to buy. You suddenly have to be online. You suddenly have to be about relationship, what we know about being spiritual entrepreneurs, and you are called to be this. Is there's less security. Used to be to start onto your job, in your 20s, you're out of school, whatever. You sign on, start working on your pension, there you go. We know now that people change careers a handful of times, let alone jobs. It's scarier to be who we are in Christendom. It's scary to lift our heads to say, here's what I believe. There's less certainty about church, about faith, about culture. And so what they need, and here's where we're heading with Margaret's piece, especially today, we have to know our own stories. I mean, this has always been true, personal testimony. Wow, this new product I tried, it's fantastic. And the salesperson has to be good at saying, here's what I find about it. In the same way, the days are gone when we could say, well, I was raised Presbyterian, so that's why I think it's a good thing. It means nothing to anybody any longer. Who is God to you? Who is the shepherd to you? If you can't answer that question, you're no good to anybody. No one cares about the tradition of the church. As a matter of fact, we know now the tradition of the church is an insult to our culture. We got to be ones to say, I got a new business book, new and improved. How about this? Creativity is scary. Adapting is hard. Flexibility is extremely difficult when we live together as a community even. Or when you're suddenly talking to your kid or grandkid on the phone or across the board table playing games. You're going to have to be able to talk their language. When they bring up the faith questions, and they do, be ready for non-traditional conversation. You got to make the sale wherever you are. You got to make your stance and statement wherever you are. In the car, at home, strolling along. And there'll be very unconventional ways the themes come up. It's still going to come up. What about grief and death? What is the meaning of my life? How can I love people? Why am I so darn mad at my sister? What can I do? How do I forgive? They're all the same themes, but the old business terms are no longer appropriate. How can we make a sale, make a connection? The way we do it, as we continue to worship and pray and listen and praise and sing, we're training ourselves to listen to the voice of the shepherd. There's very specific ways to do that. It takes time, it takes intention, and it's really all we have left by way of certainty is following the one who says, come on, it'll be risky. It'll require a lot of you. There are absolutely no guarantees. Follow me. Let's sing.